from everything that we say. Now, we only have one guest speaker here, and he wanted to hide in the closet. So at this point, I'd like to bring him out, Alan.
All right. See in there?
Hello, Bernie Sanders.
So you can say you saw Bernie come out of the closet.
Hello, Paul Bergman one.
Yeah, so...
You want Bernie's twin?
No, leave the other twin in there. All the words that we're going to talk about tonight really are Bernie's words. They're not our words. We are just simple folk. By the way, my name is Jamie Canfield. I'm a local boat captain here in Manatee in Sarasota County.
He took the helm of the Bernie campaign in Manatee County. Let's give him a applause.
We're going to have to listen to those things all night? Anyways, those are good. Yeah, I like it. This is my co-moderator, Mitch Mallet, and I'll introduce him later because he is going to do one of the issues. We have 4 issues tonight. 4 issues, and we have a very, very time restraint commitment, so we're going to have to get right with it. So the first issue is foreign policy, and I'd like to have Ellen Tillotson please come up here.
When she's coming up here, I want you all to know that it's the first time we use this equipment, and I have to go through the email because I can't put it on the hard drive. So I think everything will go smooth.
Ellen was a teacher for 33 years in the advanced curriculum of a high school program in Texas, and she was a delegate to the National National Conference. Yes. What year was that, Ellen?
That was in the year that I'm too old to remember.
Okay. All right, and she has a lot of experience in education, and she's going to talk about our first issue, which is foreign policy. Okay? It's all yours, Ellen.
I started kindergarten in 1953. Sorry, is it on? Yeah. I started kindergarten in 1953. The United States was still involved in the Korean conflict. It was the Cold War, and we lived in an atmosphere of fear and hate. We were all just 5 or 6 years old on that first day of school, and teachers issued dog tags with our names on them and our addresses. When asked why, we were told that there were people out there called communists, and they wanted to drop bombs on us. Living in New York, we were a primary target. The dog tags would allow officials to identify our bodies and let our parents know if we were dead. At 5 years old, I didn't know what any of that meant, but I knew I was supposed to be afraid, and I knew who I was supposed to hate. So many politicians today tend to do that to us. They tell us who to fear, what to fear, and they tell us to hate. They prey on our fears and our prejudices for their own benefit. Senator Bernie Sanders is not one of those politicians. Bernie says, "We live in a difficult and dangerous world, and there are no easy or magical solutions. As President and Commander-in-Chief, I will defend this nation, its people, and America's vital strategic interests, but I will do it responsibly. America must defend freedom at home and abroad, but we must seek diplomatic solutions before resorting to military action. While force must always be an option, war must be a last resort. While we must be relentless in combating terrorists who would do us harm, we cannot and should not be the policemen of the world, nor bear the burden of fighting terrorism alone." The following are the foreign policy issues that Bernie Sanders has identified. The wars in the Middle East have destabilized the entire region. They've created an environment for Al-Qaeda and ISIS to flourish. Drone strikes are ineffective. A policy based on fear and hate has caused us to sacrifice our values for the illusion of security. The Pentagon has a budget that is too large. Iran is on the verge of becoming a nuclear nation, and the National Security Agency has too much discretionary power. Unlike many other candidates, Bernie doesn't just tell you what's wrong in the world. He proposes solutions to solve these problems. Bernie Sanders believes that foreign policy is not just deciding how to react to conflict around the world, but also redefining America's role in the global economy. Sanders believes that the test of a great and powerful nation is not how many wars it can engage in, but how it can resolve conflicts in a peaceful manner. Bernie Sanders voted against the war in Iraq. He is the only candidate that did. He doubted the motives for military conflict. He questioned the validity of the intelligence we were offered. Bernie questioned if Iraq really even had a nuclear program, and he worried that the war was for the profit of the industrial and military complex. Leaders have been warning us since 1960 about the military complex, that businesses and corporations that support the military are more concerned with their profits than with our security. How can we go to war for profit? Ask Halliburton. Sanders says that the Iraq War was our greatest foreign policy blunder. Let me repeat that. The Iraq War was our greatest foreign policy blunder. This distinguishes Bernie Sanders from all of the other candidates from both parties. Sanders calls for a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It will be up to the United States to help find a peaceful resolution to that conflict. A compromise must be reached that allows for Israel's borders to be respected, and the nation must be fully recognized by the Palestinians so that Israel can live in peace. On the other hand, Israel must recognize a Palestinian state that is sovereign and economically independent. Hamas must stop attacks on and from civilian targets. Israel must cease settling the West Bank. As president, Bernie will work towards a negotiated settlement that maintains long-term peace. The United States must use its influence to bring both parties to the bargaining table. Continued aid needs to be tied to good faith negotiations. How can anyone negotiate a settlement to a conflict that goes back for thousands of years? President Jimmy Carter used the influence of the United States to bring about a lasting peace between Israel and Egypt. If elected president, Bernie Sanders can do it between Palestine and Israel. Senator Sanders supports Obama's efforts for an agreement with the United States, Iran, Great Britain, France, Germany, and Russia regarding Iran's nuclear weapon program, while avoiding another war in that region. The agreement is not perfect, but it is better than the path we were on. We were heading too close to military action. But as we know, alliances and the balance of power in the Middle East shifts daily. It will become increasingly difficult to continue on a path toward that lasting peace. We must have a president that can do that. Sanders says that our foreign policy, based on fear and hate, has caused us to sacrifice our values for the illusion of security. As president, Bernie will close Guantanamo Bay. The United States is supposed to deplore torture techniques, and yet in Guantanamo we accept waterboarding and other methods of torture and call it enhanced interrogation methods. Fearmongers suggested everything from building a wall around our nation to halting immigration or building detention camps for undesirables. Walls and detention camps will not provide real security. We cannot allow extremists to encourage us to give up our values. We cannot forget who we are and what we stand for. We must rein in the power of the National Security Agency. Collecting data on phone calls and emails does not improve our security and denies constitutional rights to some Americans. Secret wiretaps of our allies does not promote a peaceful world. We must be trustworthy. We must earn back the respect of our allies. This makes Bernie Sanders stand out from the remaining candidates. Drone strikes are ineffective. Even when we get our target, we have frequently endangered or even taken civilian lives. This encourages recruitment in terrorist organizations. The collateral damage outweighs any potential benefit. We cannot lose sight of how volatile the Middle East really is and how quickly alliances change. Just in the last 2 days, Iran has lost ties with Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and Sudan. The United Arab Emirates has downgraded its ties to Iran. North Korea today says it has successfully tested a hydrogen bomb. The balance of power is changing daily. We need Bernie to help maintain this. Reducing Pentagon spending is another area that a Sanders presidency would be different from other candidates. If we shoulder less of the burden in paying for international crises, we can cut our budget for the Pentagon. We can rein in their uncontrolled spending. The Pentagon built a 64,000 square foot command center in Afghanistan. It has never been used, it never will be used, and was never asked for by the military. But it cost the Pentagon more than $34 million. Bernie cites other examples of wasteful spending by the Pentagon and says they happen at the expense of education, social programs, and even wages for servicemen and women. Bernie Sanders supports higher salaries for our military and increased benefits for veterans. As the former chairman of the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs, Bernie knows what the cost of war is. The most recent statistics show that 67,000 Americans lost their lives in 12 years of Middle Eastern wars. More than 500,000 Americans returned home wounded or suffering from PTSD or other traumatic brain injuries. While other candidates want to send young Americans to war, Bernie wants to send them to college. Sometimes war really is the only choice. It must not be our first option. But when military action cannot be avoided, Bernie tells us there are 3 criteria that must be met. We can't just say, let's go get them. A military response must be limited in scope. It must have clearly articulated goals. And finally, it must have the support of our allies. We cannot do this unilaterally. Senator Sanders says that regime change cannot be a goal. He differs from other candidates here. He believes that regime change breeds more instability, and that instability leads to more terrorism. We must respect the sovereignty of other nations and uphold the rule of law in those nations. We must use diplomacy and not military force to accomplish this change. Bernie Sanders always supports negotiations, but he does not always favor trade agreements. He has a long history of opposing NAFTA and Trans-Pacific Partnership. He believes that these agreements need to be renegotiated so that American jobs are protected. It's not that the wording of the trade agreement says that our jobs will be sacrificed, but rather an atmosphere is created where American corporations take their businesses overseas to take advantage of cheap labor. This keeps our wages down and our benefits at a minimum. Senator Sanders believes that we need a sane foreign policy that relies on the support of our allies and does not result in compromising our values. We must work to provide human rights throughout the world. We need Senator Sanders to be our next president. Please vote in the primary on March 15th. And as Jamie said, make sure you are registered as a Democrat. Thank you.
She did say 67,000. She meant to say 6,700. Okay, but when you think about that in comparison to the amount of Iraqis that have lost their lives in the war in Iraq, it's 6,700 versus anywhere from 500,000 to 1 million Iraqis that have lost their lives in that war. Okay, so folks, I just want to run through a couple of other things. In Bernie's Brigade, what we're trying to do is create a brigade of volunteers in Manatee County to go out into the community and canvass door to door. So that's the goal of the brigade is to gather more volunteers that are willing to go out and actually knock door to door and tell people why they should vote for Bernie Sanders. So you'll see clipboards on your tables. If you're willing to do that, we would appreciate you signed up with your phone number and your email contact, and then you write your name on a sticker and stick it on the map so we know where you live, so that we can know what part of the community you live in, and therefore we can tap into you, and hopefully you can help us get Bernie to win. By the way, Bernie was on Morning Joe this morning, and he said he was great. But one of the things he said, never underestimate the message. And so that's what we really need to think about, that the issues are not going to go away, even if he wins or loses. These issues are not going to go away. So we're just going to take a period of time now for everybody to just relax and talk to each other at your different tables about what
I'm going to turn
Ellen
off the
has just
broadcast.
said
I'll
for
come
a
back
few minutes,
on
and then
when it
we'll
starts
have a question
again.
and answer period. So just
Please
turn to your neighbor,
watch
try to get to
for
know your neighbor, and talk to
this
them
channel
about what
to be
Ellen has talked
broadcasting
about.
again.
Thank you.
Thank you.